That was about as much fun as I've ever had. I mean, because if you like the period, to be able to stumble upon all those documents that had not been mined, it was a total fluke. I knew what I wanted to write, but I had no idea those documents were all new. And then you're reading this stuff and you're comparing it against the books, and it's not in the books. And you're realizing, I just remember that slow dawning that, oh, Jesus, I've got a million pages of new stuff. The whole thing was funny. My third book tanked. And on the fourth book, the only thing I knew is I was going to quit trying to chase commercial success, and I was going to do something I wanted to do. And late one night, I was watching one of those A&E biographies on Ma Barker, the supposed gangster from the mid-30s. And I was curious, when was she at large vis-a-vis the other names I knew from that period, Bonnie and Clyde, John Dillinger? It turns out they were all at large in the same 2 years. It was pretty clear they were, and it was a critical moment in the birth of the FBI. So among the first things I did was I called the FBI. They said, yeah, we do have files. They didn't say much about it. And I went down there, and in a basement, it was in their FOI reading room, there were all these binders, black binders of stuff. And there were dozens, ultimately over 1 million pages. Well, initially, I didn't yet have command of the literature. I didn't know what all had been written and what had not. But it was only when I started reading them and comparing them against the books, I realized these had not been sourced by anybody. They had, in fact, had only been issued bit by bit in the previous 3 years. So nobody really had time. It was dumb luck that I stumbled on these things. Over 1 million pages. Ultimately, I think I bought it all at 10 cents a page. You can do the math. My ex-wife, my wife at the time, was not happy about this, but it was not, if you're going to base a book, if this is going to be 60 to 70% of your book, I lived in suburban New Jersey. I can't be going down to DC every week to read that stuff. I need it in my office. I loved the period. I loved the characters. And it was that kind of aha moment in an author's life where you're like, oh, I've got a serious breakthrough I can do here. Look, let's be clear that not a bit of a word in Public Enemies or any of my other books is made up or imagined or anything. It's taken from people who were there. In this case, okay, so first I stumble on these 1 million pages of government documents, which are reports by agents who have to tell you second by second, minute by minute. For the bad guys, I got very lucky. One of the bad guys, Alvin Karpis of the Barker Karpis gang, lived into the 1970s, 40 years after events. And he published a little book in the 70s. In fact, 2 of them, if memory serves. And it was okay. There was the one thing about Karpis was that he met almost all of them. He mentored Nelson. He worked with the Barker Karpis gang. He even claimed a meeting with Bonnie and Clyde. We know that he had a history with Dillinger. My second aha moment was when I tracked down this was 15 years after the book was published. I tracked down the ghostwriter and said, do you have notes? And he had a lot of notes. He had his handwritten notes and typed notes, several hundred pages of the stuff he didn't use. Well, a lot of it was just great for Karpis's take on the others, which was not as critical to his own book. So there was a lot of new material there that did help me humanize them. But it's the totality of all that when you put it together and try to synthesize it that allows you to have the confidence that you're getting it historically accurate, which is all that matters. He was clearly the brains of the Barker Karpis gang. And he realized early on that banks were starting to armor up and that it was going to be increasingly difficult to hit them now that banks were starting to put armed guards. And so he was among the first to notice that there was a beginning to be a booming market in kidnapping wealthy businessmen. The FBI was very new to kidnap prevention, certainly to kidnap apprehension. And so it was Karpis who really kind of started those big money, multi-million-dollar kidnappings that we saw during the Depression. He was among the best at it. And then it was also Karpis who was really the only one who was able to escape. They all talked about going off to South America or something, and he's the only one who did. He hid in Cuba for a long time. This was at the height of the Depression, the depth of the Depression, a time where an awful lot of people, especially in the Midwest, were hard pressed. They had lost their farms, their small businesses, and they blamed it on the banks and the insurance companies and the big, rich guys on Fifth Avenue. And John Dillinger did not make a big display about I'm fighting for the common man. But when they saw him robbing banks, a lot of it seemed like a victimless crime. He by and large, especially in those early 6 months, was not shooting people. And a lot of people did begin cheer him on. You see it in the letters to the editor, in the Indianapolis paper, in Milwaukee, in Chicago. There are letters. I must quote one or two in the book saying, "What have I got against Dillinger? He never took anything from me. It was the banks that took everything from me." Academics call that, social banditry, which is, a phenomenon that we've seen with others like Pretty Boy Floyd. Oklahoma has always been a hotbed of social banditry, and going all the way back to Jesse James, where a lot of people wanted to kind of give him a glow or a righteous nature that he probably didn't deserve. So Dillinger fell into it. But the other thing that was amazing about Dillinger that was unique, he was the only one of the major criminals that I'm writing about, public enemies, who was captured and interviewed at the height of his fame. And he comes across, he was just so good on TV. I mean, it wasn't TV, it was film. He stood there in the jail, he smiled, and he put his arm up on the shoulder of the prosecutor, as opposed to what Americans were used to, are these tight-faced, angry Al Capone-like gangsters, grr. And here was John Dillinger, good old country boy, and then son of a gun, he ups and escapes. And so that was really what made that's the reason we're still talking about John Dillinger almost 100 years later.